Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim. I'm an addict. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you to everyone who made this meeting possible. Um, there was the quotation earlier, love and tolerance is our code. Now, I don't want to be a stickler, but I'm going to be. Love and tolerance of others is our code. Um, love is a one of those very dangerous words. It can mean so many different things to so many different people, and whatever it means to you is legitimate for you, I'm sure. Um, I was loved a lot before I got into recovery, and it didn't help. It was, in fact, when everybody let go of me that I finally sought help. And I was reminded recently of one of the particular ways in which love was shown to me when I got clean. My sponsor was, I'm sure he's a very nice person, and I'm sure he was nice to me, but my memory is not that he particularly was. I mean, he was perfectly friendly and civil, but he didn't want anything I had. There was nothing I could give him of any value whatsoever. He had his own life. He was fine, thanks. He didn't need me. Uh, And now lots of people said lots of lovely things in meetings, like we're going to love you till you can learn to love yourself and let the love of the fellowship wash over you and all of those things. And some people, that is water on parched ground, because they haven't been told they've been loved for a very long time. I was like, I didn't do this, but behind in my mind, I was going blah, 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 because it, I didn't have the receptor for that. But what struck me about Doug, because his name was Doug, was that he was smart, he was interesting, he was funny, he had a rather interesting job. He was a little bit of a doctor. And doctors are interesting to have as sponsors, let me tell you. And he didn't care what people thought about him. He was from New York, which might have something to do with that, but in London, so he had nothing to prove. People didn't hugely like him because he was cheerful, cheerful, cheerful all the time, because he'd learnt how to be in a 12-step program. And he really was not bothered by other people. And he had what I wanted, which was the ability to stay sober, first of all. He was in his early 30s, around 10 years sober. And the second thing he had was the ability to live well, to live successfully without touching the sides, without being troubled by the events of his life, without being troubled by the events of the world, just getting on with it, rumbling along nicely. And what struck me was that he would take time out of my life to show me how the program worked. And I inferred from this, I must be of some intrinsic value, or he wouldn't be spending time on the case. So he didn't love me because I was special. He didn't love me because he wanted something. He didn't love me because I was different than other people. He didn't love me because I stood out. But it was a terribly impersonal sort of love, which can't be expressed in words and which can only be expressed in actions. And the action was the time he was spending. And once, by contrast, many years later, someone said, who had some sort of hang up, they were a bit tearful, and they said, do you love me? And I said, I do. But I love all of the people that I'm trying to help in AA. She said, but do you love me? She wanted to be found special by me. And that kind of deal doesn't work for me either way round. It's this universal love. And I don't want to get medieval on you, but there's a medieval philosopher. and theologian, who talks about love in lots of different ways. And he says it comprises two things. The first thing it comprises is wishing people well, benevolence, a not because you found a little group of people you think are special and important, so you wish them well. It's wishing everyone well, even the people who you think are your enemies, even the people who have nothing to offer you, even the people you find disagreeable or strange or objectionable or just dull. To wish those people as well as one does the people one actually loves in a sort of different personal sense. So benevolence, and the other one is beneficence, which is to do good. Benevolence is to will the good. Beneficence is to do the good. So love and tolerance of others in AA, in CA, in the Big Book, as one implements the Big Book, is to foster and develop goodwill towards others and then to act for the good of all. And I'm included in the all, but I'm only a very, very, very small part of that all. So I barely get a look in that endeavour of acting for the good of all, benevolence and beneficence. And I'm to be tolerant of other people. The word tolerance crops up in the Big Book a lot. Patience, tolerance, kindliness and love, patience, tolerance, understanding, love. And it comes up in in different combinations. And there are half a dozen of those words which are clustered differently, but tolerance is at the center of them. What it means is even if I don't like you, I have to put up with you the way you are, with a smile on my face, without complaining, without attempting to adjust, to alter, to shift, to nudge in the direction I think you need to, just to leave people alone, to leave people be. And they might change, but give it 10 to 20 years. Don't turn round 5 minutes later and wonder why they're not better yet. Because I've been sober and clean since the 24th of July, 1993. So I'm coming up to 32 years now. I was 21 when I had my last whatever, and I'm 1,000 years old now. And some things have only sorted themselves out recently. The stain doesn't come out of the shirt entirely straight away. It has to go through the washing machine a lot of times. I get to express and practice tolerance with other people, but I get to practice a couple of things with myself. Forgetting myself entirely is one thing, but also being intolerant of my own character defects. Acceptance isn't the answer to all of my problems. It's the answer to the things that I cannot do anything about. The things that I can do something about, it is my job not to accept them, to say this is unacceptable. This behavior has gone on long enough. But more of that later. I'm going to do some basics now. So why am I here with you charming people on a Thursday evening? Now, I don't want to be rude, but there are other things I could be doing. There really are. I really enjoy my life. I really like work. I really like the stuff I do in my free time. There was one of those things many years ago that I think they called them memes or cartoons or something. And it was a two sides, cat and dog. And the cat diary said, and the cat looked very miserable. And it was in a nice house, but it was very miserable. And it said, day 473 of my captivity. And the dog was saying, going to the park, my favourite thing, having lunch, my favourite thing. If everything in my life is not my favourite thing, my attitude sucks. So if I'm happier away from home than at home, I've got a problem. If I'm happier at home than elsewhere, I've got a problem. My job is to find joy wherever I go, to find joy whatever I do. But There's a cold, hard truth at the center of my experience of being in recovery, and it's this. I have alcoholism. I also have addiction. I think they overlap considerably. There are some specific things about alcohol which make it a little bit different than benzos or heroin or some other things or marijuana. The dynamics can be different. But essentially, what it boils down to, even though some of the details are different, is this. For me to have a drink or a drug would be to set in motion a process that no human power can stop. I started drinking in my late teens and I did some other stuff too. And although on several occasions I desperately wanted to stop altogether and indeed made a, a frankly impressive and valiant effort in staying sober and clean for a few weeks and a few months on more than one occasion. The fact is, I start again, and even those breaks, they're not sobriety really. They are technically in that one doesn't have any alcohol in one's system. But the alcoholism was just having a breather. It was letting me recover my strength a little before going in for the next round. It was not done. I was keen on solving my alcoholism and addiction all on my own. What was required at the end of the day was a surrender. What is a surrender? A surrender is when I'm looking bleakly at my own inability to stop and something in me collapses. It's very like the moments before suicide when you look at the aggregate of what you've achieved so far and you think, you know what, it's not worth the bother. I'm done. And at that point, one can go two ways. One can either go straight back into it thinking, I'll just get this over as quickly as possible, or utter that incredibly hopeful line, there must be a different way, or even there ought to be a different way, not even knowing whether there is anything behind that, just the notion that there might be a different way. And I learnt of the fact that there was potentially a different way from watching a television program in the very early 1990s where a flamboyant character who was associated with the Soho and Chelsea art scenes in the 1960s, who was on the television a lot, was prominently sober. Now, she didn't break her anonymity in that she didn't say, I'm a member of AA in good standing and all of that. She didn't do that, but it was known that she was sober. And she was on one of these wretched daytime television programs, and the idiots asked her, what do you do now you don't drink? And she said, everything. So I knew there was one person in the universe who was interesting and was sober. I knew some interesting people, but they were all drunk. I knew some dull people who were sober, but she was the first person I'd encountered who was interesting and sober on the same day for several days in a row. And I thought, I could do that. If she can do that, I can do that. And what's interesting to me is that I've sponsored hundreds of people over the years, and I've made the frightful mistake of trying to, as it were, sell the program, making an effort to convince people that A, sobriety is attractive, B, sobriety is possible. All it took was one interview that I saw on television, not even conducted by AA members, without AA even being mentioned, for me to then pick up the phone a few weeks later, and somehow I knew instinctively to look up alcohol in what was then called the Yellow Pages. Someone explained to the children what one of those is. And I found Alcoholics Anonymous and I called it. All it took, if God wants to get through to me, He will. He doesn't need people ramming the program down my throat, doing a hard sell on it. If you're doing the hard sell, the person isn't ready, or they're ready and they're now bored because they've already bought it. But it is simply unnecessary. I was very worried about something a while ago, and I thought it was a very serious matter. And I said to my other half, for I have another half, I said, who's not in recovery, and I said to my other half, I said, what should my attitude be towards this situation? And he said, insouciance. In other words, not take it extremely lightly. And people took me extremely lightly when I was new. They did not match my drama with drama of their own. They barely paid any attention to it. And I was, I think the technical term for it is a victim. I was suffering greatly, and it was everybody else's fault. And I was constantly on the lookout for why my parlous state uh, should be attributed to other people's behavior. I was a walking accusation. They weren't having that either. And sometimes people treated me badly in AA. Why? Well, I might have treated them badly first. I have no recollection of that. Uh, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. If I'm getting a reaction, there might have been an action which brought it about. But no one ran after me like I was an imbecile. They said, "Why don't you look after yourself? This is how you do it." No one rescued me. There was no one to run to. We had to work things out for ourselves. I'd managed to get through those years of drinking and coping with all of the things that being an active alcoholic and an addict will bring into one's life. I could handle people being rude to me in AA. I really could. When I was new, therefore, I had a very serious matter on my hands. The matter I had on my hands was this: if I were to drink again, I might literally never stop. And I saw people around me dropping like flies, drinking again and dying, drinking again and getting into the most frightful scrapes, drinking again and having a personality change, with the new personality having no interest in being sober. It was like they were taken over by something else. And so the urgency of my situation, I was already aware of the gravity of the situation, but I wasn't fully aware of the urgency of my situation. I needed to do something about my alcoholism right now, because if I didn't, it was as though alcoholism was waiting behind every corner and I never knew when it was going to pounce. Um, the way alcoholism operates, this mental obsession business we talk about in the big book, it's an unfortunate term because it rather suggests that to drink again, one must be preoccupied with drinking, and that if one isn't thinking about drinking at all, one is somehow safe. One often hears people in meetings saying, "Well, I'm having a rotten week and I haven't called my sponsor and I haven't done any step work and I haven't been to any meetings, but it's progress, not perfection. And I don't feel like drinking, I'm not thinking about drinking, so I'm obviously doing really well." Whether or not I'm thinking about drinking now is not an indicator or a predictor in any way at all of whether I'm going to be thinking about drinking in 8 seconds' time. And the point about the mental obsession is it's not something that I preoccupy myself with. It's a thought which comes along and it occupies me. By the time it's occupied me, it's too late. This is, I think, well conveyed with the word hijack. By the time the hijack is underway, it's too late to bolt the door or do whatever it might be to prevent it from happening. By the time it's happening, it's too late. And the hijack situation, that's the mental obsession. It grabs me and takes charge. The hijacker turns out also to bring along a number of hostage takers. So it turns very rapidly from a hijack situation into a hostage situation. What does that mean? It means that when I've had the first drink, I'm going to have another one and another one and another one, and it's going to go on for years. And I'm going to do some other stuff too. Might be substances, might be behaviors. It's nice to mix it up, isn't it? Keep your body on its toes. It never knows quite what's going to come down the tubes next. And the hostage situation is over when the hostage taker is done. And you've probably come across the notion of Stockholm syndrome, which is where the person who's taken hostage is under the supervision and in discourse with the hostage taker for so long, they start to take the hostage taker's side. Now, remember that this hijacker, the mental obsession that got me into trouble in the first place, that tells me that a drink is a good idea, it sells me a very persuasive story, and I buy the story. And the story it tells is you need a drink because dot dot dot. And you're drinking in order to dot dot dot. The becauses and the in orders to. And I think to myself, that's very reasonable. Well, of course I should want a drink given this is happening or that is happening. And of course a drink is going to make me feel better. Now, the fact is there is no problem that alcohol can solve. There is no problem a drug will solve. If I've got a problem with a state of mind, a chemical is not going to help. It can mask it, but it can't solve it. It doesn't matter if the chemical has come from Kevin off the council estate or if it's come from a Harley Street doctor. Chemical's a chemical. If I rely on a chemical to solve a living problem, I'm postponing ever solving the living problem. And in the meantime, everything I say is untrue because it's being altered by the chemical. Everything I think, everything I feel is now a fraud because it's being altered by the chemical. I'm no longer in reality. You adjust reality by 1%, the whole picture is off. So the mental obsession, it doesn't just march me to the off license. It sort of convinces me along the way that it's a frightfully good idea. So Stockholm syndrome, I ended up believing everything that alcoholism told me, such that I didn't even think I had a problem for a while. But you know what the funny thing is? For years into AA, I would explain uh, very seriously, very severely, without cracking a smile, that I drank because, and I cited all of the reasons, the emotions, the circumstances, the terrible events of my childhood, the 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 things that I created in my life because of my drinking, which then, in a vicious circle, seemed to propel me ever further into the alcohol. None of that was true. I loved the line in the book for a while. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect. That's men and women, regular folks, not alcoholics. Now, I thought I liked it until I didn't like it and discovered I was going to have it anyway. And I realized, well, right from the beginning, other people who were drinking and using around me were having, by and large, a very innocent time. It was good, clean, if you'll pardon the expression, fun. And they might have been a bit groggy the next day. With me, there was a terrible conflict. Right from the start, it was producing as much darkness as it was light. It was creating as many new problems in my emotions and in my relationships as it was solving right from the beginning. Actually, I did not like the effect, is the truth. Actually, it didn't solve any problems. Those assertions that I drank because or in order to was simply the story that alcoholism was peddling me in my active addiction. And when I was saying at 10 years sober, I drank because I drank in order to, that was my alcoholism still talking, preparing for the next drink. Why did I drink then? Because I'm an alcoholic. Very simple. There is a little bit of my physical brain which has been programmed by the fact of having had a drink to want another one. And it goes into overdrive if I actually have one. Very simple. My physical brain is not thinking about this. It's just now programmed. And I know that once I'm programmed as an alcoholic, once I'm programmed as an addict, that programming is stuck there. And I know this because I used to smoke ordinary cigarettes, and I didn't even smoke before I joined AA. But I started smoking in AA. It was in 1993. All of the meetings were smoking meetings. You were going to be smoking anyway. You might as well bring your own. And I stopped after about a year relatively easily. And 7 years later, I started again for reasons that were completely insane. And it took another 7 years to stop. Once the mechanism is established, it's there for good. Hard luck. Now, what was also clear was that I had had terribly good reason to put the plug in the jug forever for years before I made any credible effort to actually do something about my alcoholism and addiction. What I conclude from this is if I were to start again, it wouldn't matter how bad it got. That would not be the thing that got me back into AA. If I start again, I might never stop. And I therefore need a buffer. I need something between me and alcohol. Now, in step one, now I'm loath to criticize the wording of the step, but I'm going to. We're powerless over alcohol. What I'm really powerless over is two things: the impulse to have the first drink, and once I've had the first drink, the compulsion to drink more. It's not alcohol. The problem lies within me. The problem lies with these incredibly potent signals from deep within me, from my physical brain, which come all the way up to the mind and impel me to act against my own best interests. That's really against what my will means. It means against my own best interests, even if I can't see it. If I can't see it, it's irrelevant. If it's against my best interests, it's against my true will. I needed something powerful to get between me and the first drink. And the only thing that was on offer was the 12-step program of AA. Fortunately, I had a good 6 months of going to meetings and really rather liking them, but discovering that going to meetings itself had no appreciable effect on whether or not I was going to stay sober that day. Could have a wonderful day and stay sober. I could have a wonderful day and then get drunk at the end of it. So I knew that meetings weren't enough. I got sober, long story, partly in Russia. Don't recommend it. Especially in the early 90s. If you think it's rough, it was rough then. People from Manchester or wherever think Manchester's rough, Newcastle's rough. It's not Russia rough. That's rough. Um, and I stayed on people's floors. I stayed on their sofas. I had people really doing their best to look after me. I knew my alcoholism laughed at these people because it knew, I mean, I rather liked them as people, but it knew that they couldn't win in single-handed combat against my alcoholism. I knew I had to have something greater. And to cut another long story short, even trying to do the program as it was suggested, I discovered I didn't have the strength. The desire to drink, the impulse to drink was closing in on me. And nothing that people were saying in meetings was helping because it wears off after a while. By the time you've heard the wonderful spiritual thing 57 times, it doesn't have any further effect. Terribly exciting the first time. 57th time, nothing. And so I did the one thing I hadn't tried, which was praying. And blow me, it worked. It worked in that I was given enough grace to not have a drink that night. And I knew the game was up. And the rest of my life of the last 32 years has been very simple, very straightforward. Stay in touch with that power. How do you do that? The 12-step program of AA is the contents of the big book up to page 164. The steps, as they're summarized on page 59, are an aid memoir. They're not the steps. Uh, the step, each step is very extensively explained. And the steps fall into two sequences. There's the sequence of the first 9 steps. And what that does is bring about a fundamental internal rearrangement. Then the last 3 steps provide me with a daily program. The rearrangement takes the following form. I'm going to run through the first 9 steps very quickly. Step 1 says, I am going to drink again, and when I drink, eventually I'm going to die, and I don't know how long that's going to take. And because I'm not in charge of whether or not I drink, I'm also not in charge of my life. My alcoholism is in charge of my life. If it lets me get on with my life, I'm good. If it decides to hijack me, game over. It's in charge. I'm not in charge. A boat recently ran into a bridge, and on the news report, it said the ship lost power and therefore control. It was unable to steer itself. The crew were unable to steer it because the ship lost power. Because I'm powerless, my life is therefore unmanageable by me. The statement of unmanageability about my life does not describe my life. It's made clear on the following page, on page 60. It says 3 pertinent ideas. The first pertinent idea is that we were alcoholic and we could not manage our own lives. That's one idea, not 2. Me being powerless over alcohol includes being unable to manage my life. The second is the consequence of the first. It's not about being immature or emotional or incompetent or maladjusted to life or having trouble with practical things. It's a very singular consequence of being unable, of not being the person choosing whether or not I drink, it being my alcoholism choosing. So that's a terrible predicament. My mind is fundamentally broken in that very specific way. It doesn't matter how sound it gets in other ways. There is a part of my physical brain that wants a drink, and that impulse is stronger than me. I need to never be in charge of my life for one moment for the rest of my life. And therefore, for me to live, there has to be something else. If there wasn't a God, I'd have to invent one or create one because I need one to survive. Fortunately, there is one. And I make the decision to live life in accordance with the program, the principles of the program, prayer, and the people around me who've got more common sense when it comes to my life than I have, and I've got more common sense when it comes to their lives than they have, because one doesn't have much common sense about one's own life. A friend of mine said relatively recently, he said he doesn't need anyone to give him uh, their advice because no one knows him like himself. And I thought, ooh, that's very dangerous because I can't see the back of my head. Other people know the back of my head better than I do. Other people know what I look like from the side better than I do. I only know myself from what I see in the mirror, and mirrors are very misleading things. So my job is to live in accordance with a system with God in charge of the system. The purpose of step 4 is to catalogue the catastrophe of me being in charge, such that once I've confessed in step 9 and become horrified in step 6 and 7, I have the willingness in 8 and 9 to go and admit what I've done wrong, to acknowledge the harm that it caused, to express regret and to rectify the situation. So admission, acknowledgement of the harm, expressing regret and rectifying the situation. AARR doesn't produce a very good acronym except which is how step 9 feels. So thank God one doesn't do the step to feel better. I did feel better way after the step 9, but in the middle of it, it was very rough. What that does is it frees me from the world. It reestablishes me as an individual with a boundary between me and the rest of the world. There's a British journalist about whose work I have no opinion, except for one line where he intrudes into the world of addiction and says that the opposite of addiction is connection. I don't think it is. I think it's detachment and separation. When I was drinking, when I'm in full flood, I go to Al-Anon too. When I'm in full flood in Al-Anon, I'm thoroughly entangled with other people. They're all the way up in my business in my mind, and I'm all the way up in their business in the interference and the monitoring and the surveilling and all of those things. What recovery is detachment from all of that. So I have integrity as an individual, and from that position of integrity, I can then form alliances with other people. But my chief connection is with God, and other people come and go, and one loves them very much. They come and go. What one has is God. God is the one that doesn't come and doesn't go, is always there. Um, there's a thing which Bill says, which is for a moment, I wanted God with me and he came. Oh, Bill, one wants to say, he was there the whole time. You just suddenly realized he'd been there, that he was there at all, and you thought he came into your life. God has been there the whole time. It was always all right. It's always going to be all right. There was an old bloke in London, AA, who would say, people worry about what's round the corner. I'm not worried about what's round the corner. I know what's round the corner. Me, our power's round the corner. And that's the truth. Whatever situation, whatever horrific situation I envisage in the future, my higher power will be there. God will be there, not my higher power. I belong to God. God doesn't belong to me. God will be there to show me exactly what to do. And I'm being prepared for all sorts of things coming in the future. And because I'm paying attention, I know that by the time I get there, I'll be prepared. What does the daily program look like? First thing in the morning, I have a good old chat to God and say in my own particular way, and essentially say, you know what? I'm thick. I know nothing. I understand nothing. My perceptions are valueless. My interpretations are valueless. None of that, none of what goes on in my mind matters on any level at all. I know nothing. Now, now we've got that straight. You direct my thinking. You give me some thoughts to have today. I only want the thoughts that you prepare for me. And so I'm just going to sit and wait for those. And if anything else knocks on the door, it can whistle for it. And then, God, show me what to do all through the day. And then I do it and then I go to bed. It's a very, very simple life, this. I don't need to worry about anything. I don't need to be concerned with all sorts of things. I don't need to be concerned with the past. I don't need to be concerned with the future. I don't need to be concerned with other people. I don't need to be concerned with the world. And most of all, I specifically must not be concerned with myself, my life, or the results of anything I do. Next thing, next thing, next thing. And that is it. I have a very small life. People boast that they've got these very big lives. Good for them. I've got a very small life. It's just fine the way it is because I know what's my business and very little is my business. What is my business? Stay close to God, perform His work well. And in return for that, I have sobriety. And with about 5 seconds to go, that's me. Thanks for listening.